Hello everyone, welcome back to Tech Booth. Today we are looking at camera shooting modes. Now for you to be able to understand the camera modes, you need to at least have a basic understanding of the exposure triangle. Aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. You can use any of those elements or a combination to get your exposure right, but those three elements are also used to get some creative effects when you adjust them. So now let's look at the main modes on your camera. Depending on the model, they'll be called different things. The first mode is the automatic, which is indicated by a green A on the mode dial. This is the best place to start with your camera as a beginner. Just set it to auto and the camera makes all the decisions for you. So those three elements that we talked about, shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, will be controlled automatically by the camera, and it judges the light through the lens to see what would make a good exposure, and all you need to do is to take the picture. With today's cameras, this auto mode works really well, and so don't be afraid to use this automatic mode as you begin. The automatic mode will have its limitations, but it's a good place to start. The next mode we want to talk about is your shutter priority. On the Canon it's labeled TV, but on most other cameras it's just labeled S. When you're in shutter priority mode, what happens is you decide what shutter speed you want to use, and then the camera adjusts everything else for you so that you get the right exposure. Shutter priority is usually used when you want to have an effect on motion, because when you have a high shutter speed, it tends to freeze motion. So if you're shooting sports or race cars or anything that's going fast and you want to be able to freeze the motion and not get a blurry image as the cars or the people playing sports are running by, then what you do is you set a high shutter speed so that you can freeze motion. But if you want, for creative reason, a blurry image that indicates speed or motion, then you set your shutter speed low. And then the third mode that we want to look at is the aperture priority mode. Now in the aperture priority mode, you are the one who decides the aperture, and then the camera adjusts the other elements to get the right exposure. So if you shoot landscapes, for example, you want your aperture to be small, and so those are high f-stop numbers, something like f11 all the way up to f22, depending on how much you want in focus and the conditions for the day. If you want a shallower depth of field, for example, if you are shooting portraits of people and you want those people to pop out from the background and have your background out of focus so that your subject stands out, then you want to deal with a larger aperture or small f-stops. So basically you want to control your aperture in cases where it's important to control how blurry or sharp your background is. And finally you have what is called the manual mode, and as the name suggests, in this mode you are controlling all the three elements that we talked about. This is particularly important where lighting conditions are a bit challenging, or you are using flash and you want to be able to creatively control every aspect of the shoot. An additional mode that you find on most cameras is the program mode. In this mode, your camera will choose your shutter speed and your aperture, and then give you some limited control of other parameters that you can control for exposure. And so it's kind of a semi-automatic mode. So if you're starting off, start off with the auto mode, get used to your camera, and then maybe move on to the program mode, which is semi-automatic. From there you can move on to experimenting with the aperture priority and the shutter priority, and finally the most challenging will be the manual mode, where you are controlling everything yourself. And there you are, an introduction to camera modes. I'll see you next time right here on Tech Booth.